What's up, guys and gals of the movement world? It's Sean Mishka, the Movement Miyagi, coming to you once again on behalf of Football Beyond the Stats in our movement play of the week, this week for week 10 of the 2022 National Football League campaign. And today we're going to get into the game that we had to get into, which was a doozy, maybe one of the top probably 5 to 10 regular season National Football League games that you will ever see between the Buffalo Bills and the Minnesota Vikings this past week, taking place in Orchard Park, New York, Buffalo, the home of the Buffalo Bills, and two of the most premier receivers in the entire National Football League in Stephon Diggs of the Buffalo Bills, formerly of the Minnesota Vikings, and Justin Jefferson, wide receiver of the Minnesota Vikings, who may arguably be the most complete and well-rounded, certainly the most explosive and dynamic wide receiver in all of the National Football League today. But both of these individuals have been guys that I have obviously drawn attention to before on Football Beyond the Stats. Stephon Diggs, primarily for his route running and his yards after the catch, and even his dynamic catchability of the ball. Justin Jefferson, I have this sneaky suspicion we're going to get into a whole heck of a lot more in years to come because his game just continues to evolve and become more polished. But today we're going to look at two respective catches that were absolutely batshit crazy, absolutely ridiculous, and the constraints that maybe were at play with them. Now, I want to give credit where credit's due here with Stephon Diggs. So we're going to watch this play a couple of times through. This one took place at the end of the third quarter with the Bills already up by a 10-point margin. And we can see Stephon Diggs doing what he does with the novelty, the creativity, and the abundance within his movement skill set, right? And I'll watch that one more time through here at full speed because really today, even though usually it's about the nuances, right now it's about this discrete task, this discrete skill of going up, catching a ball in an unpredictable and highly variable place and placement, right? And we see some nuances of Stephon Diggs. And one of the things that is a calling card of his adaptability, his dexterity is truly in his attunement and his sensitivity almost at all times. So across situations and across conditions, Stephon Diggs, probably alongside of a guy like a Devontae Adams, is super sensitive, super aware, super attuned to the constantly changing situation. What do I mean by that? Before we get into the Justin Jefferson play, look at the peek back here as Diggs goes up and gets this ball. Again, this is prowess, action capabilities under the collation of constraints, right? We're talking about a ball back behind, and I just hit my hand on the little ledge here in my basement, but in my basement office. And as he comes up and gets that ball, watch him take this peek around as he secures this. Okay. Just really nifty layered stuff right there. So while he's coming down, while he's landing in a place where usually guys would be focused, at least those who are lesser skilled, are focused on just securing the football. That certainly is a focus and an emphasis of Diggs because the ball is the program in this way, right? The ball is highly specifying. You need to catch the football first and foremost. You need to secure it. But you also have one of the top safeties in the entire league, his former teammate, Harrison Smith, bearing down on him. And look at Diggs just adapt because of this informational pickup. And he doesn't let Harrison Smith get the type of lick on him that Harrison Smith typically gets on a wide receiver who's catching a ball over the middle. Super cool, nuanced stuff from Stephon Diggs here that I don't want that to go unnoticed. And we'll see it here from another angle. Watch this head turn around and peek around. Guys, this is something that the more scenarios they were in where you were able to make these types of plays and being able to pick up defenders, I think we can all come to the conclusion that one would become sensitive to this constantly changing problem, primarily when it is threatening, right? So now that we got into that play, and like I said, I wanted to give credit where credit's due. Here's the play that we will feature today. Now, like I said, back in 2020, it would have been when Justin Jefferson became a rookie for the Minnesota Vikings. He was selected in the first round for the Minnesota Vikings simply because Stephon Diggs had just gotten traded for to the Buffalo Bills. Now, both teams, I would argue, are winning in this respective trade, right? And I know that's really difficult to conceptualize because how do both parties win? Well, the Buffalo Bills got a guy who ended up leading the league in rushing, or excuse me, in receiving yards the very following year after being traded. The Minnesota Vikings got now the guy who has really developed into the premier, or at least a premier wide receiver in and across the entire National Football League. But a few things I want to point out here before we get in deeper to what Justin Jefferson did on maybe the best catch you could ever potentially see, or at least in that argument. What makes this game as fascinating of an illustrative case study as it is notice a few things about the confluence of constraints here. And before we even ever look at the play, I want to show you, obviously, the score 23-27. The Vikings are behind 2 minutes remaining in the entirety of the game. And most importantly, to this respective situation, they're down on the bottom as I highlight each one of those things. It is 4th and 18. There aren't a lot of plays in the playbook that are good for 4th and 18, right? But with the way that Kirk Cousins has been playing, shout out to Kirk, who has been obviously been playing much, much more effectively and functionally under this new regime, because I think they allow him to be a whole heck of a lot more authentic than the past regime did, the coaching regime, that is. So I don't mean to knock anyone, but I am, because I feel as though they handcuffed and shackled Kirk in a lot of ways. And right now, he's proving a lot of people wrong. So including myself, I've been critical of him for his performance under pressure and anxiety in the past, particularly in primetime games or against better teams. Kirk is showing himself to be somebody that a lot of people in the league did not think he was. Secondly, when you have Justin Jefferson and you have this respective type of playmaker, you give them a chance more often than not. And that's exactly what Kevin O'Connell, head coach for the Minnesota Vikings, and Kirk Cousins here on 4th and 18, going for it all. And you obviously got to go for it all on 4th and 18, right? With 2 minutes left to go, you're not going to get the ball back here in this situation, even though you have one timeout remaining. You're not likely not going to get the ball back. So if Justin Jefferson doesn't make this extraordinary, acrobatic, insane catch on 4th and 18, the Minnesota Vikings go on to lose this football game. And there were a bunch of plays in this game. One made 81-yard run by Dalvin Cook that could have been placed at the movement play of the week. A couple of interceptions by Patrick Peterson. There were plays being made on both sides of the ball for both teams that could have been placed in this placeholder as the Week 10 movement play of the week. But this catch of all plays had to be the one, right? This is absolutely, like I said, batshit crazy when we think of what it took place under 4th and 18, less than 2 minutes to go. These types of plays are plays that only the stars among the National Football League are capable of making, right? And I know that's intuitively obvious. And some people will look at this and just think to themselves, well, this is a God-given nature over nurture. But I believe that it's always a little bit of both. I don't think that people are born to catch a football per se, right? Or they're born with certain traits and qualities that might predispose them to being able to excel at this level. But still, at the end of the day, this here, guys and gals, is the very definition of dexterity, right? Per Nikolai Bernstein, 1996, the ability to solve any emerging movement problem in any situation, in any condition. It doesn't get bigger than a different type of situation or a different type of condition than this. What's the situation? A ball with a defender coming in, draped over the top of you, fighting in this interaction, this really local interaction for the ball, game on the line, 4th and 18, difference in conditions. Obviously, you're in a playing a game where you're playing arguably one of the top 3 to 4 teams in all the National Football League in the Buffalo Bills. It's in a situation where it's 4th and 18, pressure, anxiety, fatigue, all of those things coming into the confluence of constraints here. Okay. So this obviously is a play which is emerging under context, right? And that should obviously go without saying that this creative movement action only emerges under this respective contextual demand. Context shapes content, and the two perpetually feed into one another. The context that is the movement problem, the content that is the emerging movement solution. It's very creative. Obviously, one has to have abundance within their movement toolbox, which will precede this level of extreme adaptability that we see from Justin Jefferson, JJ, number 18 for the Minnesota Vikings. Just crazy, crazy stuff. And then not only obviously with catching this type of ball, but let's think of how behavior affords behavior. We got this defensive back for the Buffalo Bills that is contesting this reception. And ultimately, remember, skilled intentionality, which is one of our themes for 2022, is about this openness and responsiveness to a rich landscape of affordances, which are going to be dynamically presented to oneself. For this defensive back, if one is really skillfully intentional, they should not try to catch the football, which sounds somewhat counterintuitive, right? Like that defensive back shouldn't try to catch the ball. Hell no, he shouldn't. He should try to knock it down. He has a receiver who's employed to catch the football who happens to be one of the most, if not the most premier pass catcher in all of the National Football League right now. It's 4th and 18. Knock the ball down. But the more skillful performers are the ones that are more skillfully attuned. Those even that are still playing in the National Football League, one of 1,696, still elite, not elite at all times and in across situations. And that's what we see from the defensive back here. I know it's easy to say in retrospect once Justin Jefferson comes down with this ball, but number 39 should be knocking that down all day, every day. But he doesn't. And that allows Justin Jefferson, by the tip of his hands, to come down with this ball and obviously steal this reception. Even though he is the receiver, he is stealing this reception from the defensive back. Okay. And under this gotta have it type of moment, now, like, watch this. We can't see the whole thing, but now we do. Look at how he is having to adapt within the adaptability, right? Like, obviously, his whole movement action and going up and getting this ball is about adaptability, but we watch it unfold frame by frame, moment by moment. And you're seeing how perceptions and intentions and actions are being intertwined and interwoven to form this movement solution to this very complex and highly emergent and dynamic movement problem that is being solved for Justin Jefferson. Okay. This is the very definition about or around dexterity, right? As we see it from another number of angles. I'm going to let it go in slow motion here while I continue to talk over it. Obviously, one has to have the action capabilities of being able to secure the ball, right? Of being able to catch the ball under changing situations and conditions. So many might often think, or even just if we look at the jump with the Diggs ball and the jump with the JJ ball here, like, we might think that all one has to do is get on a jugs machine, right? But what I have found with the more skillful performers in all the National Football League, primarily at the wide receiver position, is that they have these global intentions that when the lights are the brightest, the pressure is the highest, the anxiety is heightened as well, they may not actually practice in this respective way. Instead, they have this driving global intention that is deep within them where they're like, give me the freaking ball. No matter what, give me a chance, even if it's a 50-50 or less type of ball, like it is in this case. Like, let's not get it twisted. I don't know what the percentages are when the ball left Kirk's hand or when the ball began to approach this dyadic relationship between Jefferson and the defensive back, but it was low percentages that they were going to pick up the first down because Lewis, the defensive back, happens to be playing this really well until he doesn't, right? And until he tries to attempt to catch the ball as opposed to just knocking it down. However, those top flight receivers have these global intentions that basically just drive and scaffold the ways that they interact. Think of Randy Moss, think of Jerry Rice, think of Terrell Owens, think of Chris Carter, who's a former Minnesota Viking. Think of Stephon Diggs, who's a former Minnesota Viking, and now think of Justin Jefferson, who's a current Minnesota Viking. Just give me a chance. And that's the part that is developed in its both nature and nurture that kind of go along and have this co-adaptive relationship that drive these types of intentions. Okay. But it's not just about the actual act of catching this ball, the skill and the skill acquisition or the ability to adapt the skill to these changing situations and conditions isn't just about catching a lot of balls. Okay. Because otherwise, then anyone and everyone could be a top flight wide receiver in the league. And we know that that simply is not the case. Now, particularly with the way that catching of the ball is usually done, it's done in rote repetition type of fashion. It might be done off of a jugs machine and the like. But for me, guys and gals, it is not about this. Yes, differential learning may have its time and its place where we can execute repetition without repetition with many different ball paths, different ball trajectories or velocities, different catch styles, one hand, two hands, off balance, on one leg, on two legs, jumping, landing, the like. You get the deal there, right? Or catch styles and the way that we're positioned with our body when we take off and attempt to catch, or even just then in this case, the opposition. But this is hard to practice. Let's not get it twisted. So I often talk here about representative task design, of course, and representative learning design. And I'm going to stop sharing it there now. You guys, well, I'll let it play through to the end of this here, and then I'll stop sharing. But I want to offer a hypothesis as to how we might be able to go upon driving, channeling, facilitating more skillful interactions for receivers in this way. And this is all purely hypothetical, like I just mentioned, particularly because it's difficult to represent this in practice. In practice, even the most elite wide receivers are going to kind of know, like, I might put myself in danger if I'm going against a defensive back and the game is on the line or it's in a competitive performance environment. But in practice and in training, they are likely not going to make that play. They just want to become sensitive and attuned to what information they may need to become sensitive and attuned to adapt later on under the competitive performance demands. So my suggestion would actually be to use a wider variety of practice activities or of movement problems that encourage or require a wider range of movement strategies or solutions, right? That would require the individual to use novel, new, creative types of ways of executing and coordinating, controlling, and organizing their movement skill in resolving or solving that problem. And I'm not talking about just experiences for younger athletes where we're trying to diversify their movement strategies. Oops, I almost knocked my whole computer setup down there. You could tell I'm trying to adapt under the fly, but I'm pretty excited about what it is that we're talking about here. but it's not just for the younger athletes. I believe that there's a time and a place for professional or elite athletes to be placed under these types of movement problems as well, even though on the surface it would look to violate some representative task design principles. And I, of all people, am a huge proponent of representative task or learning design, right? Where the movement problem should look, act, feel, sense, smell, etc., just like it will within the sport. But I do believe that there's a time and a place for pros and elite players, and I do a lot of it, say in the first 4 to 6 to 8 weeks of the National Football League offseason, where I try to get them comfortable in coordinating, controlling, and organize more variable and more adaptable movement solutions to problems that require novel strategies or solutions that are still dynamic. They're still alive. They have there's an indeterminate system that's there's unpredictability present. There's typically opposition involved in it. But I'm talking about even activities such as that are usually proposed to be different, that could be a donor sport to some of these types of interactions, parkour or natural type of movement, or maybe, just maybe in this case, things like gymnastics or learning to contort one's body in certain ways and to be comfortable doing so where there's safe uncertainty. And I believe that there's something here, even with more elite athletes. And even though, like here, like I've already mentioned, the ball is the program and the ball is highly specifying, so are defenders and how that defender is interacting in order to keep you from solving your respective problem. Those things are very specific to the context. So therefore, we could represent them. But I have found that wide receivers, even the most elite ones, don't actually practice that per se, except in competitive scenarios and situations. So we run ourselves into a dilemma. But I believe, like I said, hypothetically speaking, we could or should do that a little bit more or look for ways of doing that in new and novel ways. Um, in in maybe different times of the year where it's still safe, but the movement problem is alive and requires a different level of adaptability or diversity from the mover themselves. So hopefully my long-winded rant at the end there, sort of speculating about what we could do or how we could do it, may start to get you all thinking a little differently about what emerged and how we might be able to facilitate these types of skillful engagements and interactions for more of the athletes that we work with. But nonetheless, Stefon Diggs, Justin Jefferson, both elite movement problem solvers, and they both displayed it in the brightest of lights on Sunday. And it becomes a treat then for all who watch the National Football League, as well as all movement skill aficionados. So I hope you enjoyed Week 10's Movement Play of the Week. I'm Sean Mishka. This is Football Beyond the Stats and our Movement Play of the Week for Week 10. I will see you guys in Week 11. If you like this video, hit the like button, subscribe, comment, share it. You know the deal. I will talk to you guys in Week 11.